One of the first challenges you'll face as you start creating styles is that you need to understand all of the different types of style selectors that you can choose from. Let me show you what I mean by that. When you go to create a new style, which you can do either by clicking on this little icon here or by choosing Format, CSS Styles, New, either way, you'll open the New CSS Rule dialog. And the first thing you'll see at the top is that you need to select a selector type. So you have class, ID, tag, and compound. If you're new to CSS, this can be a little overwhelming at first. So before we go much further, I want to give you just a quick overview of how you can best use each of these style selectors. The first one here on the list is the class selector. So if you were going to create a class style, you would select class in this dialog, and then you would enter a name for your style here. Now, class names can be anything you like. You can literally create completely new style names, but they always have to start with a dot or a period. Now, don't worry about that too much. If you forget that and you've selected class, Dreamweaver will add the period to the beginning of the name. But let's go ahead and do it ourselves. So a common class style name might be something like dot caption. This is a style that you could apply to anything on a web page and that you can use as many times as you like on a web page. So class styles are especially versatile, and they're really good for things like captions. For example, if you have several images on one page and you want to format the text under each image as a caption, you could use the caption style over and over again. The second kind of style in this selector list are ID selectors. Now, ID styles are much more restricted. You can only use ID styles once per page. But they do serve a very important purpose in web design, and they are ideal for styling things like div tags when you create CSS layouts. Another thing you should know about ID styles is that the name of an ID style needs to begin with a pound sign. So just like that, the pound sign goes at the beginning and then no space before the name itself. Now again, you can name ID styles anything you like, just like class styles. Just remember, no spaces, no special characters. Many designers use a style called container to define the div tag that contains all of the content on their page, and that's a great use for an ID style. The third kind of style on this list is a tag style. Now, when you choose the tag selector, you're going to redefine an existing HTML element. Remember, in the first lesson in this chapter, we changed the color of this headline, and this headline is styled with the H1 tag. You can see that down here in the Property Inspector. In Format, you can see that the heading 1 is selected. That's the H1 HTML tag, and the style that we saw in the CSS Styles panel is really a redefinition of that existing H1 style. But you should know that you can actually redefine any tag in the HTML collection, and Dreamweaver provides a very handy list of them here. So if you wanted to redefine the H2 style, you could select that from the list. If you wanted to redefine the font style, you could select that from the list. And if you know the style and you don't want to bother with the dropdown, you can just type it in yourself. The final option on this list is the compound selector. And this can be one of the most confusing styles, again, especially if you're new to working with CSS. The compound selector essentially enables you to create styles within styles, or even styles within styles within styles. The effect of that is that you create styles that will only display when they're contained within another style. So you see here, Dreamweaver automatically assumed that I want to create a style that's inside the container, that's inside another div that has an ID called main content, that's inside another div called photo center, and then finally the H1 tag. So if I create a new definition for this H1 tag, it will only work if that H1 tag is inside all three of these kinds of styles. Now you can simplify it. You can decide, well, I'm not really worried about container and main content, but I want to make sure that the H1 in the photo div is different. Or a very common thing to do is to have something like one area of the page defined as the sidebar and another area of the page defined as the story or the main content area. And in that case, you might want to be able to have an H1 tag that is, say, dark burgundy and extra large in the story area, and maybe another H1 that you can apply in the sidebar that would be smaller and a different color. By creating these compound styles, you would be able to use that same H1 tag in both places, but have it appear differently. You'll see some examples of this as we continue through this chapter and the next. But again, before we get into that, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of these 4 different style selectors and why you might choose one over another. So class can be applied to anything on the page, always starts with a dot. ID can only be used once per page, always starts with the pound sign. Tag is for redefining existing HTML tags, and compound lets you combine styles to create more specific styles.